So Aston Villa are absolutely flying. They just smacked West Ham 4-1, putting them 5th in the Premier League. They have the second most goals this season, only behind City with 22. And that win against West Ham puts them on 11 consecutive wins at home. And Ollie Watkins is scored like he's getting paid weekly to score goals. What? Apparently he does get paid weekly to score goals. Unai Emery's been at Villa for coming up to a year now, but what's he changed that's created this absolute behemoth in Ollie Watkins? First, we got to look at what came before Unai Emery, and I'm afraid Villa fans were looking at the Gerrard year. So Steven Gerrard was sacked about this time last year, October 2022, after they lost 3-0 away at Fulham. And this is the team that Gerrard put out for his final fateful game. Now, I think one thing that's very clear about this team is the formation. So this is the 4-3-2-1 that Gerrard really loved to use, and commonly known as the Christmas tree. The main problem with this formation throughout Gerrard's tenure was the fact that Ollie Watkins was here, rather than being up front in a front two, as Unai Emery currently has them. This meant that Ollie Watkins was doing a lot of the wide work, because obviously you don't have a winger on this side. John McGinn would try and help him out, but Ollie Watkins would be pushed out to that left-hand side, somewhere where you don't really want him. And this also meant that John McGinn would interchange with Ollie Watkins into these areas. So if Ollie Watkins was to stay centrally and move up to here with Danny Ings when they were attacking, John McGinn would have to fill in this left-hand side. And as we've seen throughout this season, John McGinn's off-ball runs are really important to how Villa have been playing. This just doesn't make sense and didn't really make sense throughout Steven Gerrard's tenure. You can see throughout the rest of the team, Jan Bednarek is playing at right centre-back, Konza at right-back, because I think Matty Cash might have been coming back from an injury, but he did come on at half-time in this game. But these fullbacks just didn't give them any width, any support. Douglas Luiz got sent off for headbutting someone. Danny Ings was pretty woeful, and this team just didn't really work, and it was kind of the end of the spell for Steven Gerrard. But when we look at the team that just went out against West Ham, you can see the massive difference that both in quality of the team that you can see, and how Unai Emery has changed quite a lot. But the main thing is that Ollie Watkins is here rather than stupidly being on the left wing for some reason. And this is a point that I'm going to touch on throughout this video, is this left-hand channel that Ollie Watkins absolutely loves. And there are so many instances throughout this season that he's been in that left channel, caused defenders absolute nightmares. So the additions of Zaniolo and Diaby in the summer really helped Villa in this situation, because it gives them so much more width. Now Zaniolo and McGinn might start a little bit wider sometimes, but they are technically 2 10s. And this means that they're generally given the freedom to move about wherever they kind of want, with Zaniolo often starting a bit wider than John McGinn does. But this means that Zaniolo, if he drives inside, which he commonly does, Ollie Watkins can move out into this left-hand channel and drag those kind of right centre-backs off into his sort of area and isolate them quite a lot. And the double pivot here is so important for Villa. Boubacar Kamara provides so much stability. He's the one that very rarely makes any of those midfield runs. But Douglas Luiz is obviously famed for getting into the box late. We'll see an example of that in a minute. But it's so important that Kamara is in this team now, because he is very vital in progressing this ball through this team and providing them defensive stability when they are transitioned against. And obviously Luca Dean and Matty Cash being fit are massive points to this team. They provide a lot of the width down the flanks, and you'll see them very often being up very high in these positions, getting up, crossing the ball into the box, and providing lots of danger for this Villa team. It's a key threat that they do hold. So just through these few rudimentary changes that we can see on just a basic formation, you can see that Emery's made quite a few changes that particularly benefited Ollie Watkins. So there are a few stats that really highlight these changes. So since Emery came in at the back end of October last season, Ollie Watkins has the 3rd most goal contributions in the whole of the Premier League, just behind Haaland and Salah. And bear in mind, in the 2022-23 season, while Gerrard was managing, in the 12 games that he managed, Ollie Watkins only scored once, and he played in every single game. Whereas in the following 24 under Emery, he scored 14 times. So when we look at this season, Ollie Watkins is the 6th highest scorer with 5 goals, but he's also the 2nd highest assister, also with 5, but he's only behind Trippier and Neto. And he has the joint most goal-creating actions in the whole league, alongside James Maddison. So it shows that Unai Emery's really helping to unlock almost this creativity that Ollie Watkins has, and how useful he is to be set up in certain areas. I feel like we can really see the confidence in Ollie Watkins, but I feel like this stat really highlights how well he is playing and how clinical he's been. So this season, in these 10 games, is the first time he's overperforming his XG since his 25-goal season with Brentford in the Championship in 2019-20. And I feel like that definitely is the confidence levels of Ollie Watkins we're seeing at the moment, a man who knows he can score that many goals and kind of has the belief in himself to do that. And I feel like this graph here is really helpful in kind of showing that difference. So Ollie Watkins' stats from last season are in blue, and this season are in red. So you can see generally that everything is up pretty much, apart from clearances and interceptions and tackles, which don't really matter too much. But the key areas that we can see that are up, the first one is the increased number of shots. Now that really highlights he's getting into better positions, and also is being encouraged to take more shots, to take more risk, And we can see from the West Ham game at the weekend that when he takes these shots, he really backs himself and he can score from pretty much anywhere. And I think playing as the dominant striker, Diaby helps to support him in that front too. But now that Ings is gone, it really has affirmed the confidence in himself that he's not constantly having to fight for his place like he was for Gerrard last season. And him having the third most shots in the league this season with 29, only behind Rashford and Haaland, just completely highlights how he has so much more confidence in himself and belief that he can score. And this is all testament to what Emery's done to really get this out of him. But what has Emery changed when it comes to tactics? So Villa, like a lot of teams in the Premier League at the moment, are a 4-4-2 out of possession. So they have as we've seen, a very quality back four. Pau Torres is a great defender, and Ezri Konsa keeps on putting his name into the mix to play for England in the summer. Even without Mings and without Diego Carlos, who was on the bench the weekend, Villa have a very solid back four. And as we spoke about, the stability of the two, the pivot in midfield with Kamara, is just fantastic at screening that defence and really helping them in the solidity that they have. And since he's been regular starter for them and kind of got rid of those injuries, we've really seen how Villa have improved. And it really helps having a World Cup winning goalkeeper at the back. Emi Martinez this season has prevented 2.3 goals compared to the post-shot XG he's faced, which, you always want a goalkeeper who's going to help save those goals, and he has been doing that for them so far, and he's a really dominant presence for them. As we said, Zaniolo and McGinn are so important with their off-ball runs. They're really high work rate midfielders. Zaniolo has been so much better than I thought he would have been so far this season, and they're both really adept at kind of occupying loads of different spaces and kind of rotating in with the front two. And you've got to love watching Moussa Diaby. His movement is fantastic, and the interchangeability that he has with Watkins and his driving runs are just brilliant to watch, and he is such an asset to the team. This highlighting the fact that Diaby has the third most shot-ending carries in the Premier League this season, so that's when somebody's dribbling with the ball and their dribble ends with somebody shooting at the end, and on average he carries the ball about 13.77 metres, which compared to the rest of the Premier League is pretty high. And I feel like a lot of these strengths are shown in the first goal against West Ham. So when we look at it, Zaniolo's holding the ball up on the left-hand side. Ollie Watkins is kind of coming into this area here, looking to occupy Soufal and create that space for Zaniolo to come around on the outside. He does do that. Soufal decides to go over with his man. I think that's Alvarez there with him to help kind of cut off that cross for Zaniolo. But he leaves Ollie Watkins in this area here as these guys both move to cut off the cross. Ollie Watkins kind of realises this space. Paqueta's completely asleep over here. It's really a weakness from him. I don't know what he's doing, but Jared Bowen spots this danger and tries to move in to kind of help. But this ball comes into Ollie Watkins, and he does have the time. And most strikers might just take a pot shot. Ollie Watkins very quickly looks up, sees that Douglas Luiz and Kamara are both on the edge, ready for that shot, and plays that pass into here, which Douglas Luiz finishes really nicely. And it's a real kind of strength that Villa do have, these final off-ball runs, but also really highlights how well Ollie Watkins kind of occupies that space and the confidence that he has to look up and not just take a pot shot like some strikers might in a very congested area. To play that ball out to Douglas Luiz has got a much clearer eye to goal. This positional awareness and creation of opportunities and space for other teammates was also really highlighted in one of the goals in Villa's 6-1 win over Brighton as well. So Jacob Ramsey's carrying the ball forwards and Ollie Watkins is kind of moving away, kind of trying to create space for him. You can see that he's not got too much kind of support going on. Luka Dean's a bit too far back to kind of create an option for him at this moment. And he's got these two defenders here who are kind of monitoring him. And as you move it forward, you can see that Ollie Watkins is starting to kind of arc his run to go into this area. And that creates the space for Jacob Ramsey to move inside. You can see that Luka Dean's not really an option yet for him, but this space is so crucial in the creation of this goal. Ramsey then is able to cut inside here as Ollie Watkins brings Lewis Dunk further out and creates this area of space here for Jacob Ramsey to really utilise. And you can really then see the space. So you have this gap between these two defenders that Watkins here has created as his run finishes off in that on the right hand side of Lewis Dunk. And Jacob Ramsey has the gap there to play that ball into the far post. Admittedly, it's a fantastic finish, but it's largely not made, but that opportunity is exacerbated in a way by Ollie Watkins creating that space for him and creates a lot clearer path to goal than he would have had Lewis Dunk just stayed and Ollie Watkins stayed and not made that run. Now, we said earlier that one key strength of Ollie Watkins and kind of the changes that Emery's made is making sure that you have him in that left-hand channel. And there's been so many opportunities throughout this season where Ollie Watkins has been in these areas and creates so much damage for these teams that they're playing against. This is one example of it. You can see that Villa are very much on the transition. Ollie Watkins is in this left-hand channel. He doesn't really have too much support. You can see that the players are getting forward in these areas, but at the moment he's kind of a bit isolated. And it's quite similar to a goal that we'll show from the West Ham game in a minute, but you can see that there's not really anyone at the back post for him to aim for. I think this is John McGinn over here. He's a little bit late to the party in a way. So Ollie Watkins has got to take this on himself. And Ollie Watkins drives forward, he carries that ball. He's a very good carrier and has been given license to throughout this season. But in this case, he doesn't score, but it really highlights the opportunities and the chances that are created for him in the structure that Emery's using. So on this occasion, he decides to cut inside to go on the outside of Botman and does end up getting a shot away, which ends up not quite going in the corner, but Pope does save it. But this is a chance that does get replicated in this West Ham game, and it goes a little bit worse for West Ham in that situation. So the ball was played in behind by John McGinn. It's gone over the top, and Ollie Watkins is again running in that left-hand channel. This time, Moussa Diaby is quite a bit closer over here to the play and does keep up with it. And Ollie Watkins continues to drive in, but it gets to the point where Diaby doesn't really have an option. He kind of comes a bit deeper, but knows that Ollie Watkins is going to take this on. Ollie Watkins does that's the first step over, takes it onto his left foot, which Zuma's showing him down the line because he's seen in certain scenarios that Ollie Watkins does like to go on his right foot. But in this situation, he goes for something a little bit different. Takes him away from where he might think he might go, and absolutely smacks that ball into the near post for the goalkeeper, who has no chance. And it really was a goal taken from a man of confidence, and it was a goal created by a man in Emery who has really highlighted a strength in Watkins when he's attacking against that 1v1 in that right centre back in that left hand channel. And when Villa are running at full speed and they have the runners from midfield, it's really, really hard to stop them, as we've seen in these goals. And this especially happens against teams that try and play a high line against them, as West Ham kind of did in this game and Newcastle did in the previous example. But I think these goals and the tactical changes that we've seen, particularly in the confidence that has been shown in Ollie Watkins in these situations, really highlights how Emery's been able to change both the mentality of this team and be able to create environments through the tactics that he uses for players to really thrive. And at the very start, with him identifying Ollie Watkins as the main threat for this team and kind of putting Danny Ings to the side, has just really, really helped Ollie Watkins to be able to focus, to not constantly be at risk of being taken out of the team, and to really, have the confidence in himself, and the manager has confidence in him to score these goals. And I feel like in the goals that he has scored and the assists that he's created throughout this season, it really smacks of a man who has a lot more confidence in himself. And, a lot of players wouldn't take on that shot on that left-hand side, that near-post goal against West Ham. But Ollie Watkins is in this form, and he knows that his manager backs him to do this. And you can see from a tactical perspective through Unai Emery, all these changes are really paying off. Villa are generally playing a lot better, and you can tell that a team are producing a lot more chances and playing tactically attacking better generally by those increases in statistics that we've seen from Ollie Watkins compared to last season. And if this can continue, then there is no reason why Villa can't continue to be in that fifth spot, continue to challenge for Europe. And with the quality that Villa hold throughout their team, the ability to take Leon Bailey off the bench, bring on Yuri Tielemans, there probably is no reason why they can't continue to challenge in the Conference League throughout the rest of this season and kind of battle on both fronts. We've seen with West Ham last season how well it can go for these English teams. I don't see why Aston Villa can't do it as well. But Unai Emery has completely revolutionised this team from the very dark days of Gerrard, and they are fantastic to watch. Ollie Watkins is a man possessed at times, and I imagine he'll be in the Euro squad come summer. So leave a like if you'd enjoyed it, subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next one.